Welcome to Moments with Mary Ann. I'm so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have a very inspiring show coming right up with special guest, Officer Steve Redmond. And he's here today to share with us his story and his nonprofit, Code 4 Northwest. So who do our first responders call when they need help? Have you ever thought about that? I was watching recently an A&E series, Addictions Unplugged, and came across this segment that Steve was so candid in and had to have him on the show. I'm so delighted he's here to share not only his experience with us today, but his hope and also his nonprofit, Code 4 Northwest. So let's welcome to the show, Officer Steve Redmond.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
What an honor it is to have you here, and I want to thank you for all that you've done for our communities and continue to do, and for all of your service. I mean, you are the epitome of a hero.
Thank you. I just do what I feel needs to be done because of the issues that are out there and things that are preventable and what I've experienced in my life, and so it's my way of giving back.
Well, I'm so glad that we've connected. I came across you on an A&E series, Addiction Unplugged, where it really went into your story. And, of course, we don't have as much time to go through everything here today, but I encourage our listeners to check that out and look at that segment. So, your story, you started in law enforcement in Spokane.
I did, yeah. Spokane, Washington. As I was going to college, I became a reserve police officer, and excuse me, I loved it. But even though going to college and reserve you're unpaid, and I would put in 20 to 30 hours a week working patrol, and just fell in love with the job.
And then later on, you went to go work full time with Seattle PD, right? And you were with them.
Yeah, I got hired by Seattle in 1992 after I graduated college, tested all around in Seattle. I got hired by them and started my career with them, and I'm still currently with them.
So you pretty much worked every aspect in Seattle PD, from what I understand. I mean, you were a DUI officer, motorcycle officer. You did just pretty much everything.
Yeah, and that's the benefit of a larger agency like Seattle. I was able to do patrol, field training officer, mountain bike units, the DUI squad, traffic cars. Then I did motorcycles. Now I'm currently the safety officer for the department, and I've been there for about 4 years, and they asked me to kind of take over that spot because it would also kind of free me up so I could do more peer support work with fellow officers within Seattle PD.
So as you're going, because you were with, and you still are, but you had a 20-year, you were with the Seattle PD for 27 years, from what I understand.
Yes.
So during the time that you're doing this, I mean, you're kind of experiencing a lot, and I'd love for you to share with our listeners just what that was like, because I don't think people really understand what our first responders go through when they respond to a call.
Well, the whole aspect of what we do is like we're always walking into the unknown. And we always have to have the mindset that whatever or whoever we're dealing with wants to hurt us in some way. And so it kind of puts us in this, what we call the hypervigilance state, where we have to do certain procedures to ensure our safety, but also ensure the safety of people that we're dealing with. And so it just kind of puts us in that mind state. And then the type of calls that we go on and the traumas that we experience may not be our own personal trauma, like an officer-involved shooting, but it's experiencing other people's traumas. And that's called what I call secondary trauma, and in which we're not experiencing the trauma, but we are experiencing other people's traumas, as far as watching, listening to them, looking at it, having to deal with the families, having to deal with the victims, having to deal with that. And so, we see things in our careers that people, regular citizens will never see in their lifetime. And if they do, maybe once, but we see it on a continual basis. And that accumulative effect of these traumas and what we experience in this hypervigilance starts to add up, and it starts to kind of have this cascade effect where you start putting the blocks on top of each other and on top of each other until at some point you just get overwhelmed.
Yeah, that place where you get to that overwhelm. I mean, it's like, what do you do then? Because I'm sure many first responders, they don't want to go and talk to a doctor or nurse because then that could affect their job.
It could. And in some states, yes, it could have a major impact on their job. So they just have to keep it to themselves, even though they're struggling. And fortunately, like where I work in Washington State, we're pretty proactive here as far as getting the mental health aspect or getting people help for their mental health. And so the problem is this, and to be completely blunt, is that it's pride and ego. And that's what kept me from getting help for so long, was pride and ego. And it's that pride of, the culture is you're weak if you ask for help, because pull your big boy britches up and deal with the job, because that's what you signed on for, and deal with it. This is part of the job. And so it was always looked down upon, anybody asking for help, and it was a sign of weakness. And you never wanted to have that, moniker. And in the old days, you could go to your departmental psychologist and say, God, I'm really struggling. I'm stressed out. Went to this call, and they're saying, okay, yeah, great. We'll help you. But in the meantime, give us your badge and gun. We're going to put you on desk duty, and what we used to call the rubber gun squad. And then it's like, it's no longer confidential, because everybody knows you are having some sort of an issue. You may not know exactly what, but nobody wanted to go through that. And so it boils down to a lot of those factors where it's pride and ego, the sign of weakness, the culture. And so it's basically, just deal with it, buttercup, and more or less. And that doesn't work.
Well, and the thing is from, what I've seen, what I've read from your website and with the series, it was really interesting because, our first responders are going through PTSD. They're having all this stress that they carry with them, and they're looking for that out.
Well, they are. And the problem is, if you're considering they're looking for an out as far as help, or what type of out are you talking about there?
Well, I'm more so, yeah, because that kind of left the door wide open there, but more so where they're trying to relieve the stress and kind of unwind or unload from what they've been through that day.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's, you get home from your shift, and if it was a bad shift, you end up a lot of times just isolating from your family or friends. And there's a great doctor out there, Dr. Gil Martin, who talks about, the hypervigilance, but then you come home, you sit in the big red chair, and you just sit there, and that's why you'll just binge watch TV, or you'll sit on a video game, or you'll just disappear, or you'll come home and you'll, be so stressed out that you need something to kind of help medicate that. So you'll have something to drink. And then as things get worse, that could progress into substance abuse. Doesn't necessarily have to be alcoholism, but it could progress into substance abuse, and or alcohol abuse especially. And that's a real thing. A lot of people come home and have a couple of drinks just to unwind. And which is, if it doesn't have a negative impact on your life, and you're still interacting with your family, still interacting with friends, and you're not, it doesn't have that negative impact, then I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but it's when it starts to have that negative impact, and you basically start to isolate and no longer are doing what you used to do that you enjoyed doing. What I had the ustas. I used to do this, I used to do that. Now I don't do anything. I just come home and sleep and just watch TV and sit on the couch and, whatever. And that's where it gets to be the bad part is, they're looking for that escape, and that's their coping mechanism.
At what point through your journey did you decide, hey, I think I might have a problem. I need to really look at this?
Well, there are a lot of red flags when I was starting my journey, and my journey still continues to this day. I mean, it's, and we can get into that here in a bit, but the it really started to where, I always was a guy with a high tolerance, and my friends used to joke that, well, when Steve gets drunk, then we better quit drinking because that means we've had a lot. And then, like I did talk about during the episode, a bunch of my friends and I back in the day when you could do this, that we went out we took a half a shift off. We all went out and just kind of went down to our local bar row that we patrol and sat down there and drank and came back up and see what we could see what our BAC was and blood alcohol level. And I was high, which I thought I was going to be pretty low because I was in better shape than all of them, at least physically. And the way I was behaving and acting. And that was the red light that came on. And it's then I knew that I had an issue, but I didn't want to deal with it.
Well, and at that time, like, how could you? Because you really kind of developed your own resource at this point,
Right.
to help people.
Well, that was the thing too, is where do you turn to? Where do you go? I could Google best treatment centers in the country right now, and the ones that are going to pop up are the ones that are spending the most money to be the first ones that pop up. Does that mean they're the best treatment center? No, it doesn't. And so there is this whole notion of, who do you turn to? My family didn't know who to turn to because they saw what was happening. They saw that I was starting to spiral down, and who do they turn to? And unbeknownst to me, as I was starting to really spiral down, my wife for about 6 to 7 months was going to Al-Anon, and I had no idea. And because she knew something was there, she just didn't know what to do either. So she started going to Al-Anon, and that is one of the reasons why the organization like Code 4 can be so important, is because we vet the resources. We know the best treatment centers that are out there, and we find the best fit for the person, not based on, we don't get paid by anybody to put anybody into treatment because we're 100% all volunteer. We get no quote kickbacks or anything, which is completely unethical. It's how do we find the best fit for the person so they don't have to try to do the research, get put through the ringer by a place that may not be good, and that then we kind of become their advocate and get them to the best place possible based on what they're presenting.
Well, I think that's such a huge resource. And it was heartbreaking listening to your story, but also it provided a lot of hope, and it was really encouraging as well, because, I mean, you had some really dark times.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I suffer from a delayed onset of PTSD, because in that episode, we talk about, okay, yeah, I have this PTSD, accumulative trauma. But one thing is, a lot of the therapists didn't want to deal with my underlying childhood trauma. And a lot of first responders who have PTSD have a lot of childhood trauma. Most trauma places that are good trauma or trauma facilities that do good trauma work will focus on 15 years and younger as far as looking at traumas. And I did have a meltdown again because I'm upfront about this, and I speak about this as conferences. I was molested as a kid, and not by my parents. Just put that out there, or anything like that, or but nobody ever dealt with that. And then that started to surface up again. And I wasn't able to deal with it until I put myself into another program that dealt with those traumas. And it's Deer Hollow Recovery Center in Utah, which I went through there and I got over 240 hours of just trauma work. And it was incredible. It changed my life, and to where I got to be truly happy, healthy, and able to move on with my life. And that's what a lot of things people don't realize is this trauma aspect doesn't necessarily have to be work trauma. That can trigger some things, but a lot of times it's childhood stuff that we didn't know was even there. And it doesn't have to be like what I went through, but it could be other traumas, and that anything that causes a spiritual, emotional, or physical pain can be considered a trauma. And so it was a good educational process for me, because I thought I knew about PTSD, and I go around the country and I speak at conferences about PTSD. But honestly, after I went through this program down at Deer Hollow, I had no clue of what it truly is, and then truly how to get the tools to combat its effects. Because it's always there. It's never going away. But you can control the effects of it.
I just applaud you for your courage, because, I mean, a lot of people go through childhood trauma, and it's still kind of this taboo topic, to talk about, even though it's being discussed more now than it was 20 years ago. And thank goodness for that. But to have that compounded with workplace trauma, I mean, I can understand when people start to come a little unraveled at the seams, because it's just so much.
Yeah, I mean, because you can look at two people who are dealing with the same trauma. One person is just fine going through that trauma, doesn't have much of an impact on them. Then the other person may start to fall apart because of it. Well, there's a reason for that. And is it from the childhood? Is it the accumulative effect? Is it something going on at home they can relate to, whatever? But that's where you get a good therapist, and good therapy can get to the bottom of it and kind of figure that out, and then work on that. Again, like I said, to give you the tools to be able to combat that, to get you beyond that. So when it does may possibly come up again, the memories are still there. The feelings might still be there. They just don't have the effect anymore.
Yeah, it's not what's really in charge. You're more in charge of being able to deal with that situation or those emotions that are coming up. And it's in your story on Annie, you shared about how you got to a point where you were actually contemplating suicide, and how your wife was really the hero that day.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, no, I was to the point of where I was, completely done. Brain was done. And by the grace of God, she just happened to call. She being a flight nurse, and usually can't call because she's out flying, and just happened to call at that exact moment in time. So if you want to call it and believe in it, but I believe that was a God shot. And I put the gun away, went in, sat in my living room, and unlocked the front door because I knew the fire department was coming. I know they like to kick indoors, and so I didn't want them to do that to me. So I just unlocked the door, sat in the living room, and they walked in, and I just looked at them and says, I don't know what to do. I need help. And they were great. And they took me to the hospital. Yes, I was a mental patient. I spent just about 4 or 5 hours there at the hospital, but had to talk to the social worker there. And then a friend of mine who showed up as a therapist, and he got me in touch with somebody who does deal with secondary trauma. So that's how I started on that road of learning about secondary trauma, is because of the people that responded there who, my wife had to make one phone call, and I had 8 people around my bed. And that's why I created the tagline with Code 4 Northwest, one call, a community of support. Is because you make one phone call, we can rally as many people as we need around you. And like I said, in support, not judgment.
How encouraging that is, because especially as a first responder, I mean, it's tough enough going through that type of a situation, would think. And then not to have the best people there would really be heartbreaking.
Well, and it's the whole embarrassment factor, and guilt and shame. And that's a driving force too of what keeps people from getting help is that guilt, shame, embarrassment. I don't want anybody to know I'm struggling. And because in the culture and really across society, if you have another illness, like say MS, people are like, oh man, that's too bad, whatever. You say I got, a mental health issue or I've got an addiction issue, then they look at it in a different light. And that's kind of what needs to change. And so if that's what you're dealing with, that, and it gets treated differently. And so the deal though is anybody who I've worked with and I've helped about, thousands of people who have dealt with addiction or mental health issues, and they take the positive step to improve their life by getting help. I've never seen any negative outcome of it if they're proactive and do it before things get super bad.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think anyone, if they were at their place of employment and had this type of stuff show up, there is that level of embarrassment and shame that would go with that, because that's where you work, and I can only imagine that it's even compounded being a first responder, because there's this image that these are the people that we're relying on and they're tough as nails all the time, when they're we're all human.
Yeah. I had a smart person tell me one time that pride cometh before fall. If you can't swallow your pride, you're going to go down. And especially when you're dealing with mental health issues such as addiction, PTSD, and people call it PTSD, and I'd like to just throw this out there. It's really, now a lot of people are calling it PTSI. It's post-traumatic stress injury. It is an injury to the brain that can be fixed, but when you put the disorder on it, that sounds worse. And so a lot of the professionals in the field are switching and calling it PTSI. So that's another aspect, because it kind of takes some of that negative connotation away from it in a sense. But but it truly is an injury to the brain. And so, but it's really, the bottom line is that there's light at the end of the tunnel. There is help out there. The person just has to take the steps to do it. And it's nothing to be ashamed of, to feel guilty about. It's part of our job, honestly. I mean, to deal with post-traumatic stress is truly part of our job. And it's we signed on for it, but it doesn't mean that we have to sit there and just reap the repercussions of the negative consequences that would occur because of the nature of our job and what we deal with. And this goes across the board of all first responders, not just police, but fire and EMS and nurses, especially like ICU nurses and ER nurses and all these people. I mean, it's part of the nature, but there's solutions.
I was surprised to hear some of the stats of how our first responders are suffering from, job-related stress so much higher than the general population.
Right. And like I said, that's because of the nature of our job. But we're hired on to deal with the worst that society has to offer. And what the general public does not nor should have to deal with. That's our job. And so we see people at their worst moments in their life, and we see the worst things that society has to offer, and it's prolonged. So it's not just 1, 2, 3, 4 years. I'm in my 27th year. We do this job for 20 to 30 years. And so that accumulative effect of seeing these things, it adds up. There's no way around it. It just is, and that's just nature at work and your brain at work, and your brain and all your trauma goes into your amygdala, and your amygdala is only so big, and at some point the amygdala says, hell no, and starts dumping. And when it dumps, it doesn't dump well.
At what point did you start Code 4 Northwest?
2013. We went live October of 2013.
And when you started doing that, who do you have manning the phones and being there to accept the calls that come in?
So we're 100% all volunteer. And so we have other police officers, firefighters, current, former, retired. We have dispatchers. We have park enforcement officers. We have admin people who work in the industry, like work for police departments or fire departments. We've got Homeland Security. I've got Border Patrol. It's people who just want to volunteer to give back because they want to help. And a lot of these people have gone through their own issues and have recovered, and so they just want to help others, so other people can maybe learn from them and be there. And like I said, they're just there because they want to give back and help, and hopefully not have people suffer. And like the suicides that occur all across the country, is maybe we can start reducing those.
Gosh, that would be a blessing, to give people the help that they need, like you're doing, and also kind of get them to a point where they're not feeling so hopeless.
Right.
That's not a good place to be in.
No, it's an awful place, and I've been there, and you feel like you're on your own little island. You feel that you can keep it together until you can't keep it together, and so it's a hard place to be, because bad things will happen.
Now, do you have treatment centers all across the U.S. that you work with?
I do, yes, and we work with the select number. However, because of my contacts that Code 4 has generated across the country, so if we have somebody that calls and our facilities aren't going to be a good fit, maybe because of financial or or what they're presenting, the contacts I have is we've yet not to be able to find a place for the person to go to.
Mm-hmm.
And so, the facilities that Code 4 uses, we've been down to visit, have seen them firsthand. I won't refer anybody to a facility, usually, unless it's just a worst case scenario that I haven't been down to, or somebody in my organization hasn't been down there to visit and talk to the clinical staff, see the facilities, see what it is, and to make sure that they're actually saying what they are, and it's not just fluff that they're telling you they're the best thing since sliced bread. And then we reevaluate if we do send somebody to a place and they have a bad experience. We figure out why that was. Was it the person? Was it the facility? And if the facility isn't up to what they say they will or what they are, we won't use them anymore.
Well, that's good. It seems that you really are vetting this so well to make sure that the first responders get the best options possible.
Yeah. I truly believe we have, and most of our facilities are on the West Coast, since we deal with Washington, Idaho, Oregon, but I sometimes get calls from California, Texas, Florida, what have you, and then we have the ability to place people in other facilities that have been vetted by others that we trust, and they say, yeah, it's good, and they do this and that, and so we always have options to find solutions for people, and that's what we work through.
Now, are the calls confidential? If someone needs to, who's a first responder, needs to make a call, where do they go?
It's 100% confidential. Yeah, we're covered under an RCW, Revised Code of Washington law from the state of Washington that says first responders who call our line, it's 100% confidential. We don't give out any information to anybody.
That's very encouraging. That way they're not worried about how this is going to impact their life and their job.
Right. Yep. And so they can call and talk, and they said it is a confidential call, and it's they don't have to worry about us saying anything to their agency or what have you. That they can get answers and then figure out. And sometimes I work with them on, if I know the agency and I've had experience with them, then we'll work with them as far as, okay, this is the steps you want to take to help protect yourself. Most places have FMLA and Family Medical Leave Act to help protect them, but some places, are still way behind the times, and people have to be very careful on how they approach things. And we do have HIPAA protection and things along those lines. But the biggest question I get is, how's this going to impact my job? And most of the time when people are reaching out, unfortunately, there's already been some issue at work or something that has triggered this. And so it's a matter of, it's kind of like going out for knee surgery. Most of the time you don't have to tell your agency why you're going out sick. And if you're going in for post-traumatic stress treatment, it's HIPAA protected. It's a medical issue. And so it's you just have to tell them, I'm going to be gone for a while and I'll get a doctor's note to come back. But you should never have to tell them why.
Oh, that's good. Our first responders deserve to have our support and our protection, especially when it comes to their job and they're looking for help.
Yes, agreed.
Without a doubt. Where could, if we have first responders that are listening now and they need help, what is a number that they would call?
Well, if you're in Washington, Idaho, Oregon, it would be 425, and let's see here, 425-243-5092. And then one thing I'll do here, and then there's a national hotline that does, they do vetted resources, and let me pull them up. I don't have their number, but I'll pull them up here real quick. But they're on Facebook. It's the Institute for Responder Wellness, and they're based out of Florida, but I trust them. And they also vet the resources, especially around kind of east of the Rockies. And they're a good resource as well. And
awesome.
Yeah.
Good to have, resources on both sides of the country. I know you cover quite a bit all over, but, if someone says, hey, I think I want to reach out to someone in Florida, they have that resource available.
Yeah. And they do the same thing that we do. They vet resources. They're not a crisis line. We're more of a crisis line response referral service. And that's one reason why I keep it Washington, parts of Idaho, Oregon, is because we can vet every resource in that region. Around the country, I have all the treatment centers vetted, and we don't mind taking calls for somebody who needs treatment. We have those vetted, but counselors and therapists, we don't have those outside of our region. I mean, we can help find them, but we haven't been able to vet them. So that Institute for Responder Wellness does have another database that deals with the rest of the country.
Now, let's say, because a lot of times people will save up their vacation or use the Family Act to go ahead and address this. Do you have people that will actually fly in from out of state to see specific counselors, and it kind of keeps it a little bit more private?
No, not because a lot of insurances, unless they're private pay, will not do that because of the cost.
Okay.
And because of licensing. However, like say if I'm dealing with somebody in Washington, I send 99% of my people out of the state for treatment. because I feel there's better treatment centers in other states that really focus on first responders, focus on trauma, and because a lot of places will say that, oh yeah, we deal with trauma. Yeah, we're dual diagnosis, co-occurring disorder, and they may get one therapy session a week for 45 minutes with a therapist. Well, that's not really dealing with trauma. Whereas, like, I went down to Deer Hollow Recovery outside of Salt Lake City, and like I said, 40 plus hours a week was just trauma work. They could deal with substance abuse, but it was just trauma work and intense trauma work. And they get down to the nitty gritty, and they specialize in first responders. And my belief, they're one of the better treatment centers in the country when it deals with first responders and trauma, or just trauma in general.
It sounds like they really get to that core issue, because that's what everything else is kind of stacked on.
Oh yeah. They get to it. They really peel things open, and then they kind of put you back together, and they give you the tools so that when you leave, you know how to handle things. And they do a really impressive job.
How can the community either support or donate to Code 4 Northwest?
They can go to our website, and that's www.code4nw.org. And there's a donation page. And so they can donate in there. And that's how we operate. We operate off donations. And all the money that comes in goes back out for trainings. And we do a lot of peer support trainings. And then also scholarships. And we've given out, we're up to probably about $40,000 we've given out this year just in scholarships to help people if they have a financial need, just to get them through the doors. And so I believe in trying to take that financial barrier out of the picture. So then there's no excuse.
Yeah. And then they can focus on their recovery.
Yep. Yeah. So people can do credit card, or they can send checks in there, but that's how we continue operating, keep the phone lines open and everything else. Then we do, one big fundraiser a year that we're doing this year on October 26th. And that just gives us our operating budget for the next year. And then donations that come in truly do help. But like I said, it doesn't go into anybody's pocket or whatever. And all the money that comes in goes right back out to operating and to get people where they need to be and the trainings that they need.
I'm telling you, Steve, you are a hero to so many. I mean, you just not only to our community, but to our first responders. I mean, my goodness, what an astounding organization you have.
Well, thank you. People say, you save lives, you do this. And I'm a firm believer, and people correct me when I say this, but this is my thought process. I don't save lives. I give people the opportunity or solutions so they can save their own life, because they've got to do the work. And that's it. It's just, I've done the work to be able to get good solutions, good options, and it's up to them to take it or not. And we'll help them however we can, but we're not going to do the work for them.
That's true. It's a personal job, but you give them the opportunity to have that. Well, Steve, my goodness, I mean, we can talk about this all day. I'm so glad that we've been able to spend this time together to talk about your organization. Thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Oh, no, thank you. I really appreciate it. And it's an honor, and any chance we get to kind of let people know that, hey, there's solutions out there. You just got to look, and you don't need to struggle. Then I'm all for that, and whatever we need to do to help spread that message. And that's why we're here, and more people. I'd love to see more people get involved, and more states even start what I started with Code 4 and starting to do their own thing. And just so, because it's all these issues are solvable. It's just when you're in the issue, you just can't see that end of the tunnel.
Yeah.
And so sometimes you just need to be kind of taken by the hand and guided around to where you can see like, oh, okay, it's scary, but wow, thank God I did it.
And there's the opportunity to do with people that you can trust too, which is a big thing. It's not somebody who's just, answering the phones. I mean, as you said when we first started our discussion, it's other first responders who are actually picking up that phone and helping.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, it's perfect. And so, yeah, it's, whatever we can do. And, we're a small little group, but we do impact a lot of people, and we're just here to try to help. And if we can't help somebody, we'll try to find them other options that maybe they can turn to get the help they need.
Well, Officer Steve Redmond, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show, not only to be so candid about your story, but to share with us what our first responders go through. With that awareness, we can also help. And of course, you want to see about donating to Code 4 Northwest. Their website is code4nw.org for more information. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Moments with Mary Ann. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Mary Ann is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Mary Ann will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Mary Ann airs every Sunday, Monday, Thursday, and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Pacific Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmaryann.com for more information.